telling you.
Oh, excellent.
A glass of white wine.
The
Isn't
intermissions,
that nice? Oh, and questions.
Oh, thank you very much.
We should
I'm
split
doing
the
this.
questions.
Your good health, everybody. And
Yes,
here's to
your
you,
good
John.
health.
All right. Well, I'm not quite sure what this bit, but these... You can shuffle these off, all right?
All right.
Do you get tired of people asking you to do old Python bits such as the Ministry of Silly Walks?
Yes.
Will you do the Ministry of Silly Walks for us right now?
No.
There have been several attempts to adapt Fawlty Towers to American television. Why, in your opinion, have they not succeeded?
Because they didn't listen to me. They always said they knew how to do it, and they were all absolute disasters, all three of them.
And may I interject, say that when we've been doing Monty Python for very little time, a bunch of American producers came over and said they'd like to buy Monty Python for American television. And we said, well, they said, no, we just want to buy it. And we said, well, what? And they said, well, we want to buy the format. He said, well, we don't have a fucking format. So I said, yes, let's sell it to them. All right, this is for you. Has your interest and involvement with psychology and therapy changed your creativity or creative output? And if so, how? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's right. You win a fridge.
Oh. I'll tell you something which I think is very profound. I think if you have therapy, it can have the effect of making you less productive, but more creative.
I always think giving interviews and doing book tours is like bad therapy, and you're asked questions, but you don't get any answers. That's all I got. I hear that at Cornell University you are Professor Cleese and have taught college classes. What are your lectures like? What kind of homework do you assign? Says Stefan in Stockholm.
Stefan in Stockholm.
What do you teach?
I teach, I've done a sermon there, because I have weird ideas about religion. I did a sermon in a great big church from pulpit, and I worked with, or have taught a bit with a fellow called David Dunning, who is a social psychologist whom I adore, who's come up with a theory that explains the world better than any other theory. He says he's discovered that he's been fascinated by how good people are at knowing how good they are at doing things. Self-assessment. He's discovered that in order to know how good you are at something requires almost exactly the same skills as it does to be good at it in the first place. So that if you're absolutely no good at something, you lack exactly the skills that you need to know you're no fucking...
That's very good. That's really good. I was asked to teach in Canada, but I was going to do the Sermon on the Mountie. With Terry Gilliam being the only American in the Pythons, how did he fit into the group that relied so much on predominantly British humour?
Well, he didn't.
What happened to him?
Terry Gilliam?
Yes.
I don't understand him at all. I kind of like him. I think he's a good-natured guy, but I've never yet agreed with anything he's ever said. He has a quaint way with the English language. On one occasion, we were having a read-through, and when we arrived, we all started to say, "Oh, let's have some coffee." And he said, "Yeah, why didn't somebody boil up a whole bunch of water?"
And by the way, he's no longer American. He turned in his Americanness and has become a Brit.
He's a Brit.
He's a Brit, I'm
He's
afraid.
a Brit.
Yeah, he is. I think it's to do with tax, overseas tax.
Is it?
Yeah, because he lived in England, you know, and Americans are greedy bastard tax authorities,
Oh,
you know.
greedy bastard.
If you so much as fart in Newfoundland and get paid 10 guineas, you have to declare that in America. Whereas now he can fart all over the world and nobody gives a fuck. Here we are, I'll do this one from a 19-year-old visiting from Tennessee, but it doesn't say where. Her name is Melody Shaver.
Melody Shaver. Melody Shaver. Is that an anagram? Let me just work it.
Could be. Could be an anagram. Could be a palindrome. Reverse idolum would be the
Melody what?
Shaver.
Shaver.
Yes. She's one of the leg shavers. She asks, what artists influence your comedy the most? Also, what up-and-coming comedic talents do you admire? Who influenced your comedy? Who do you love?
The Goon Show. Do you know who the Goon Show was? I think everyone was influenced by that because we were all about 15, except for him who was 11. Peter Sellers, Harry Seacombe, and Spike Milligan, who was a genius at writing comedy. And also, he did a show, Spike, just before we started, called Q3, I think it was. And I remember watching it. It was a sort of feeling of horror. And I then rang up Terry Jones, and I said to Terry, "Did you watch that?" He said, "I just did." He said, "I thought that's what we were going to be doing." So he was enormously influential. But other people, I don't know. Who do you think we were influenced by?
Well, I would say Beyond the Fringe for me changed my life.
Yeah,
when I saw them, I just
But then they were doing very literate satirical comedy, and we didn't
But I
really
loved
do
all
that.
the old comedians. I loved Tommy Cooper.
Wonderful.
I loved Frankie Howard.
Max Wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a big tradition because we didn't get television until we were 12. So we didn't grow up with television. We grew up with radio, which I think is one of the secrets of Python. Because radio is really good for writing, you know, brain sketches.
That's right.
So radio is very, very strong.
You know, I always say that what people find it very hard to understand about Python, and I promise you it's true, is that we were basically 6 writers or 5 writers who used to perform our own material. And there were lots of squabbles and fighting and arguments. They were always about the material. Was the material good enough? We never squabbled about who was going to play what role.
Yeah.
It's very strange, you know, and if we'd been actors primarily, that's what we would have been fighting for, to get the best parts.
It's true, that. Fawlty Towers? Basil Fawlty was based on an actual hotel owner.
I know.
I think we can vouch for that, don't you?
Yes. Eric stayed at the same hotel, and when all the others left, Eric and I stayed on. And tell him about the briefcase.
Yeah, well, this is like, nowadays it doesn't seem so weird, but I had all my football gear in a little case, and I left it in the lobby and went to the loo and came back, and it was gone. And I said, well, where's my briefcase? He said, oh, I put it over in the back of the car park. I said, why? He said, well, I thought it was a bomb. So,
And his name was Donald Sinclair. And when I wrote Fawlty Towers, I took the set designer down to the hotel, and Sinclair had left and sold it. And the guy there was disappointingly pleasant and competent. But when 10 years after I made the series, I actually mentioned the very first time about Glen Eagle's Hotel Torquay and what to say, Sinclair. And the Daily Mail tracked the poor man down to his retirement home in Miami, and he wouldn't speak to them, but they managed to persuade his daughter to watch 2 episodes. She'd never seen it before, and at the end of the 2nd episode, she just turned to them and said, "That's Dad."
well, it is a brilliant series, and it is quite interesting because it is the only series, I believe, to be written by a husband and wife while divorcing.
Well, let me just be a little pedantic here. We wrote the first series when we were married.
Oh, okay.
Then we got divorced.
Okay.
And then we wrote the 2nd series after we got divorced, because we always liked each other. We just couldn't live together.
And you are very, very sweet to her in the book. It's very nice. You're very nice about quite a few people. You love your father, which is very nice. You quite rightly disdain your mother, who was a nightmare. Even when we knew you back in the day, you would always tell stories about her.
Yes?
John was a big star on English television, on the Frost Report, and he's on television. He'd go home and he'd fall asleep, and he'd wake up and his mother was cutting the back of his hair. She was that controlling. A strange person, right?
The very first time I took Connie down, we had a particular show that we wanted to watch. So we said at breakfast that day, there's a show on television at 9 o'clock, and Connie and I watched the other episodes. Could we watch it? And they said, fine. My dad and mum said, well, fine. We'll eat a little bit earlier, and then we'll go to bed. So Connie and I sat down to watch the show. And during the following hour, my mother came into the room on 13 different occasions.
Well, you're very nice about Connie, which is nice. She's a lovely lady. And you're very nice about Graham, which is also lovely to read about, because I know at certain stages he irritated you. And I know that irritation is the one thing that really gets to you, because irritation seems to be something about Western Supermare and mothers and fathers.
Well, is it just that we can't get angry because that would be losing your temper, which would be a loss of face, and that irritation's as much as you're allowed, do you think?
I see.
But what was it, when did Gray irritate me most? Because was it after he became alcoholic?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, after that,
Yeah.
That did piss me off, because the trouble was that he couldn't remember his lines, so he would write funny sketches, and sometimes they just had to be scrapped. There was a studio one when he was sculpting me. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do.
And we had this very nice sculpture of me, and it looked exactly like me, except the nose was about 3 inches too long. And when he finished sculpting me, he said to me, what do you think of it? And I came round, and I saw the nose, and I said, yes, I wonder, I'm not sure, do you think? No, maybe not. Well, do you think maybe the nose is a little bit too long? And he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, it was about this long.
Yeah, it was huge.
And I was sort of trying to suggest that maybe he needed to take a bit more off, and he absolutely couldn't see it at all and became very angry with me. And I thought it was a wonderful sketch, and we never did it because he couldn't get the lines right. In the end, we literally abandoned the sketch. And that's very annoying when you spent a week on something.
No.
But he was magnificently mad. I mean, I tell in the book a story about when he was asked on one occasion, God knows why, but they asked him to go to the Oxford University Union, which was famous for its political debates, and they asked him to speak in a debate about nuclear disarmament, and it was a very serious thing, and there were a couple of cabinet ministers, or, you know, somebody in the cabinet and someone in the opposition, and there were a couple of big stars, you know, pundits from television, and Graham turned up to debate nuclear disarmament dressed as a carrot.
I think it was rather relevant. All right, quick question?
Yeah.
5 people, dead or alive, or literary creations would you most like to have dinner with?
Dead or alive, who would I most like to have dinner with? I would like to have dinner with W.C. Fields. Yes, I would love to have dinner. I would like to have dinner with Cary Grant. I would like to have dinner with Plato and Christ, I think that. And...
But not Socrates, because the drinks are shit.
Yeah. So I've got Plato, Christ, W.C. Fields, Cary Grant. Oh, and you!
Oh!
Oh!
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, next time we're all in town, we'll do that then.
And we'll all have dinner together, and we'll charge people to come and watch us eat. This was Eric's idea, that we should take the O2 over and just have dinner there, and people could come and watch us. They wouldn't be able to hear what we were saying, but they could bring sandwiches.
We might still do it, John. Don't give it away.
Don't look. It could be a reunion.
It would be a reunion lunch. Yes. Somebody's trying to be funny here. The biggest headline on your book tour seems to be an appearance on the Graham Norton Show with Taylor Swift, in which an insult was made about her cat.
Oh,
that clip now has over 2 million YouTube views.
It was absolutely wonderful. I thought, you know, I know nothing about music. I mean, this man is brilliant at music. On the other hand, I am the worst. I mean, I was actually in a Broadway musical once where I was not allowed to sing. He knows this story. I went along to the audition because they asked me if I would go along audition. It was called Half a Sixpence. It was with Tommy Steele. And I just thought it was so funny being asked to audition because I'm the worst singer. I'm beyond hopeless. So I went out and I read the pages of, you know, the dialogue, and I made them laugh. And then they said to me, "Will you sing?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, just sing anything." And I said, "I don't know anything. I can't remember a tune." And they said, "Well, sing your national anthem." And I said, "All right, how does it go?" And I went home giggling and thinking I'll be able to tell my my grandchildren that I was once auditioned for a Broadway musical, and 2 days later the phone rang and they gave me the part. I was kind of rattled. I thought, well, what the fuck do I do? And I turned up to rehearsal on the first day, and I went up to this lovely little round guy called Stanley Lebowski, the musical director. I said, "Stanley, I told them at the audition, I want you to know this, that I can't sing." And Stanley said, "John, I've been on Broadway 40 years. Everybody can sing." And then he took me over to the piano, and 20 minutes later he changed his mind. So I just mimed the songs. I came out going... How did we get onto that?
It was a question. It was a question.
What was the question?
Is there anything in life you've always wanted to do that you haven't yet?
Yes. I would love to strangle Rupert Murdoch with my bare hands.
I think that means something in Australia, strangling the Murdoch. Is there anybody you'd like to meet you haven't had the chance to yet?
Oh, that's interesting. There must be somebody I'd like to meet.
You met the Dalai Lama, didn't
I
you?
met the Dalai Lama. I like the Dalai Lama. He's operating on a different level from us. He's extraordinary. I asked him about why Buddhists laugh so much, which is lovely, because they do giggle a lot. They just think everything is ridiculous, which it is. And he said, what I like about laughter is that when people laugh, they can have new ideas. And I thought that was very interesting, because creativity is allied to relaxation, and that's allied to play. And that's like Eric and I play together. You know, we just have fun. We just relax and play. We don't know what we're going to say next. I think that's the essence of creativity. It's not a left brain activity.
And I think while you did say you couldn't sing, we did write a classic song together.
That was so pretty.
We wrote a song called Eric the Half a Bee, which in its own way is a classic. I'm not going to sing it now because we don't have a guitar.
I don't mind if you sing it, I just don't want to sing it myself.
But we wrote that under the influence of schnapps.
Oh!
We were filming in Bavaria, and you were dressed as Little Red Riding Hood, which is a totally unforgettable fucking sight. One of my favorite things ever. He's walking through the forest, chewing on a chicken bone, knocking over trees. Fucking, it's just fabulous.
But what is so strange about that is when you put the costume on in the morning, you giggle a lot, but of course by lunchtime, you've just forgotten.
You have.
And I was in this Bavarian restaurant up in the hills, you know, fir trees everywhere. And after lunch, I went to have a pee. And I walked into the men's loo and past this tiny little Bavarian in lederhosen who was coming out. His expression was the funniest.
Yes.
And when I was doing a sketch with you once, when we were doing something completely different, the film, and we were doing a sketch where I come in with a mask and a striped jersey and a big bag saying swag. Do you remember that? And I can't remember, what did we do in the sketch? I don't remember. Anyway, afterwards, it was lunchtime and I needed to cash a check, and I went... I stood in the queue. And when I finally got to the cashier, he being English, he looked up, not the slightest reaction at all. Said, "What can I do for you, sir?"
We'd always be somewhere, and it was lunchtime. We'd either be in full drag, and you'd go, "I'll have a pint of beer. What are you going to have, mate?" We'd always be like that.
Yeah,
it was always. Anyway, I think we should curtail this, because these good people need a drink.
Yes.
I think maybe I would recommend that you read this book. It's a very interesting book and a nice book. Seriously, and it shows a very sweet side to John's nature, which isn't always immediately apparent. But which is very much there and is very dear and sweet. And I want to thank him for having known him for 52 years. It's fairly extraordinary. It was lovely to have our comeback and be in public doing this wonderful goodbye. And I think you should say something to sum up the evening and say good night to these young people. Or not.
You treacherous bastard.